Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks, and welcome to the second episode in our Peter Gabriel week. Very excited. Peter Gabriel's always been one of my very favorite artists. I got Neil Young and Bruce Springsteen kind of up at the very top, but then there's this second tier right below them with a few elite artists, and Gabriel's right there. One of my very favorites. Love Peter Gabriel. You can probably tell from if you've been watching my channel, I bring him up with reverence here and there. Done a few episodes on different Peter Gabriel stuff, but here's finally the Peter Gabriel week. Now, if you watched the last episode, we did an in-depth review of his brand new album, I.O. I say brand new, he's been releasing it throughout the year online, but finally a physical copy. And so, go watch that review if you missed it, if you want to hear about his new album. This episode is the ranking episode where I get to rank his studio albums, in my opinion, from worst to best. And so it'll be interesting to see, where does this fall? You're going to have to watch to find out. So Peter Gabriel, really, I discovered Gabriel, I got on board sometime in the early to mid 80s. And then, quickly investigated his back catalog and then have been keeping up with everything he's put out as we've progressed ever since. And just one of my all-time favorites. I mean, fewer artists I respect more than. He's smart, sometimes too smart for his own good. He gets kind of lost in his own concepts and will spend years trying to develop things instead of just putting out some music sometimes. But it's always worthwhile when he does put something out. And just an artist I have admired, going all the way, back to the Genesis days, and then of course his amazing solo career. So let's get into it. What to include or not include? Because he's got 10 sort of traditional studio albums of music. But then what about the soundtracks? Those of you who know Peter Gabriel well, he's done he's contributed songs to a lot of different soundtracks, but he's actually done 4 like scores, full scores, soundtrack albums for different movies. And to me and to a lot of fans, those records are pretty essential. I mean, essential parts of his discography. It's not just little side things. I mean, in fact, all but one of them. Well, no, two of the 4 he even renamed. I mean, yeah, they're soundtracks to these films, but also put their own like titles on them as if they're kind of their own musical works aside from the film. And they really are. They work as I think their own musical works. And so I went back and forth. I was like, do I include them in the ranking, or do I just save them for this next episode we're going to do, where we kind of wrap up with the comps and the live albums and all that? I went back and forth, and initially I even had a ranking without them in there, and there's one especially that is just one of my very favorite albums of his, one of the soundtracks, and I was like, no, man, they gotta be in there. I think it's interesting. That brings it up to 14. It's still not too bad for a ranking. The fact that Gabriel will, have a decade or so go by between records, makes it's where it's not like having to dive into Neil Young's 5,000 records or something, right? Even with the soundtracks, we can rank 14 records. We can do that. So let's do it. All right. Without further ado, coming in at number 14, I do have 2010's Scratch My Back. Now, this is kind of a special edition with its companion record as part of it. So this is the actual album art of Scratch My Back right there. And then its companion piece, And I'll Scratch Yours. Scratch my back, and I will scratch yours. So, this was kind of a interesting concept. I think it turned into a lot more trouble than it might have been worth, in the end. But it was kind of a cool idea. Gabriel wanted to do a covers album, so his Scratch My Back is a covers album. And, it's part of why it's ranked probably at the bottom. I'm not a huge fan of covers albums usually, but it's a covers album. But it was kind of a cool concept where he excuse me, he's going to cover these artists, but then he wanted to get each of the artists that he covers to do one of his songs. So it's sort of a trade back and forth. And he wanted to kind of release the records, together as this set. So, Gabriel's albums of covers, and then each of those artists he covered, covering one of his on the second record. Scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Kind of a cool idea, right? Well, I think Gabriel ran into an issue of getting all of these other artists to actually, take the time to record one of his songs and get it back to him. This thing dragged out for a couple years, which I think he intended it just to be this little side thing that he'd knock out real quick. So obviously the ranking part here is for Scratch My Back, Gabriel, the record of Gabriel doing the covers. My issue with this is, so he didn't want to do it with kind of traditional bands. So he didn't have any guitars, didn't have any bass, there's no Tony Levin, there's no traditional drummers. He wanted to do like orchestral. And so he got this guy, John Metcalf, to sort of be this arranger and kind of, to help him do these arrangements. And they're all like orchestral. And they're kind of dull. There's some of them that really work. Like there's a handful of them that I love. But as a whole album, it's kind of glacial. It's like these really slow, not real intricate, because Gabriel, he kind of wanted to do this kind of simpler arrangements, just real emotional, and a whole record of it's hard to get through for me, honestly. What do I like? I love his version of Heroes, David Bowie's Heroes. That's where that sort of really slow, glacial, I'll use the term again, pace, it really works. It's beautiful. And then there's these crescendos, these really emotional crescendos, and that's the opening track. So you put that on, and like, wow, this could be really good. But you kind of wish he would vary the style, a bit more. "Boy in the Bubble," Paul Simon's song, I think is very good as well. That's about it. I mean, the rest of these, they don't stand out to me. I don't remember them that much. Just real briefly, the "And I'll Scratch Yours." David Byrne does a kind of a cool, I don't remember. What else? Randy Newman doing "Big Time." It's like the perfect, like if you're going to pick one Peter Gabriel song for Newman to cover, that would be it. Because that's kind of Gabriel's most, I don't know, cynical, sarcastic song in his whole catalog. So yeah, it's perfect for Randy Newman. And Newman does it in his own style, and it's perfect. It's so great. Arcade Fire does "Games Without Frontiers," which is kind of cool. Lou Reed like slaughters Salisbury Hill. It's hardly recognizable, but it's interesting. Paul Simon does Biko. That's pretty good. Nice kind of spare Biko, which is nice. Anyway, so some of it works. Some of it works. It was kind of interesting. There's three artists who ended up not reciprocating. Now, David Bowie told him at the outset, this is this period when Bowie wasn't recording, and Bowie said, I'm great, do Heroes, but I'm not recording stuff, So he got Brian Eno to reciprocate for Bowie, so that's cool. So Eno, what does Eno do? Mother of Violence. Brian Eno does Mother of Violence. And the two that just flat out didn't respond, Radiohead, supposedly Radiohead like disliked Gabriel's version of Street Spirit so much that they just like said, forget it, we're not going to do it. And then Neil Young, typical Neil Young, kind of flaked and never turned anything in, never turned in his assignment. So anyway, there you go. All right. Coming at number 13. It's one of the soundtracks on CD here is OVO, the Millennium Show from 2000. Now, I'm not from England, so I don't know what the hell this whole Millennium Show was all about. But anyway, Gabriel was commissioned to do the soundtrack for it. And, yeah, I remember when I bought this, I was angry. I hated this. It had been what 8 years, since Us, and he'd put like one live album in between, but that's it. So it's like 8 years, and then this. What the? I got so pissed. I remember I sold it back, and then later I bought it again because I'm a completist, so yeah, I had to have it. Listening to it again recently, preparing for our Gabriel week, I've softened my stance slightly. I still don't think it's really good. Partly, he has a lot of other artists, so Gabriel isn't singing every song. It doesn't help that he opens the album with a rap. It's not him rapping, it's someone else, but the story of Ovo is kind of awkward, like rap, just kind of give you the whole narrative, and awful. I don't know. There's a couple of songs that have lasted. Father Son is all right. Downside Up is one that he kept in his sets for years afterwards, which I've always felt was all right. I didn't love it. The Tower That Ate People is actually a really good song, and so that's a kind of a Gabriel keeper. My favorite is The Nest That Sailed the Sky, which is this really spare, beautiful instrumental. For me, that's my favorite track on here. I think it's gorgeous. I love it. Anyway, Ovo. All right, coming in number 12, we have another soundtrack. This was 2002 from the film The Rabbit Proof Fence. And Peter Gabriel has called this album Long Walk Home. Long Walk Home. I actually never saw the film. I was supposed to see it with my girlfriend at the time, but I got held back at work, and by the time I showed up to meet her at the theater, it was too late. Yeah, that wasn't one of my best moves, but anyway, I never saw the film. But the music is super moody. Yeah, just kind of Gabriel soundtracks. There's a lot of synthesizer and that kind. So it's kind of Vangelis-y, but very good. Very good. But instrumental mostly. There's a little bit of vocalizing, but mostly instrumental, moody music. I like it. All right, coming in at number 11. This will be the last CD. Everything else I've got on vinyl here, but New Blood from 2011. I would like this on vinyl, but this, I think so far, is the only one that he hasn't really put out, at least mass produced, where it's affordable on vinyl. So he enjoyed the tour so much for Scratch My Back, because on the tour he brought out an orchestra and did those songs, but also created orchestral versions of his own tunes to put into the set list. Enjoyed that so much, so guess what this is? These are the orchestral re-recordings of his own material in the Scratch My Back style, with John Metcalf helping to arrange. I think these are more successful than his covers. It's kind of interesting. He actually takes some more sonic risks on his own material than he did on other people's material. Wallflower, and he makes some good choices here. Wallflower is gorgeous. You can kind of hear where something like Wallflower would work with the orchestral arrangement. Rhythm of the Heat is good. Red Rain is really good. Yeah, I mean, it's good. But again, I'm kind of more interested when he gets off of this orchestral stuff. So, all right. Coming in number 10, we go to 2002 with Up. The long-awaited Up. This was in a lot of gestation, but nothing compared to how long he took to make IO, right? But Up. This one sounds like he worked on it for that long. I mean, it's about 10-year period between Us and Up. If you, yeah, about 10-year period, and yeah, it sounds like it. This is really dense, not real commercial at all. Us had been a fairly big hit, but it's almost kind of going back to more of a, I don't call it prog rock exactly, but art rock, kind of the prog rock, art rock mentality here. Long songs, really dense production, almost claustrophobic in some sense. But there's some good stuff on here. I like Darkness is pretty jarring, probably his most intense song since his prog days. I saw, wearing the t-shirt, I saw his tour a couple months ago, or in October, and he played Darkness, and it was pretty stunning rendition live. But Um, More Than This is a really good song. I love I Grieve, but that's an old song that he had given to a soundtrack a while back, and then he sort of redid it on his album. But I love it. But then you got stuff like the Barry Williams Show. It's kind of ham-handed, ham-fisted, whatever you want to call it. It's just sort of he's taken on the you know stuff like the Jerry Springer Show and all that. And maybe it was fresh when he started writing the song, but since he took 10 years to put the record out, it's kind of a stale topic by that point. Anyway, it's all right. It's all right. That's one that you really need to really get into it. You got to kind of focus and dive in. All right, coming at number 9 is another soundtrack. His first soundtrack he ever did, which is to the film Birdie. He just calls the album Birdie too. It's from 1985. Again, very kind of Vangelis-y, synths and moods and all that. He, some of these songs he, are kind of instrumental variations of some of his other songs. But he at least admits it. He kind of puts in parentheses, from Family Snapshot, from Not One of Us, from Rhythm of the Heat, from Wallflower, from San Jacinto, right? And he even has a little kind of, you know, disclaimer here where he says, I've included, the titles that have been obviously rated. I don't want anyone to be deceived, So I guess he wants to know that he's sort of recycling some of the joke, but these are like moody instrumental pieces. I think they really work, separate from their original songs, and some cool originals. I like the opening At Night and then going into Floating Dogs. It's pretty cool. Anyway, nice moody soundtrack, which I really like. All right, coming at number 8. Gonna going back now, 1978, his second solo record, Peter Gabriel, or also known as Scratch. Now, said this before, but I'll tell the story here, right? His first 4 records are all just entitled Peter Gabriel. And, they have his name up here, then they have some kind of striking image. And most people refer to them just by, this has become known as Scratch for obvious reasons. And then we'll get to the other ones here. But, it's kind of, I think it was a cool concept. He said, I kind of viewed them as like issues of a magazine or something, so it's like, and you could differentiate from the cover, but they're all be called Peter Gabriel. Well, the record company Geffen didn't think that was such a great idea, and they kind of more and more started to demand titles, which is where he finally went into the short as possible titles like So, Us, Up, right? So anyway, but this is Peter Gabriel 2 or Scratch. Robert Fripp producing on here, which sounds like should be cool, but this one's a little spotty, but the highlights are really good. DIY going into Mother of Violence it's kind of cool. It was these sessions, I believe, where Robert Fripp first met Tony Levin, Gabriel's longtime bassist. And then, of course, Tony Levin joins King Crimson from the 80s on. So that's kind of cool. What else is good here? Exposure is cool. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think this was a little rushed, especially for Peter Gabriel standards. A year later from the previous record, that's very rushed for Gabriel. And I think some of these songs could have had some more gestation, or maybe he could have written some other stuff with some more time. It's not bad. I mean, it's good. It's good, but I think it's the least interesting of those early records. Okay. 7 and 6. Now, 7 and 6 are a tie for me. I don't think I've ever done a tie in these rankings. I cannot put one of these over the other. I think they're different from each other, but I think they're in quality. It would be a toss up, Well, one of them is the new one. This is where I have this, and then the other one is Us, right? So IO and Us. I mean, take your pick. I really am giving them a tie. So I guess if you're counting, there is no 7, and then these are tied in the 6th slot. Okay, well, we'll do it that way. Now again, go watch my previous video is for the review of I.O. But let's go ahead and talk about Us real quick. Now his studio follow up. I mean, he did a soundtrack in between, but his studio follow up to his mega seller. So, somewhat in the same vein, but kind of a little moodier, I think. It stretches out a little bit less directly for the pop jugular that So was. And the reason I think I.O. is actually more consistently good or great than this is. But I think this has some higher peaks. And so averaging all that out, that's why I came to a tie. But yeah, Come Talk to Me is just an epic opener. Just, God, I remember I saw him on this tour and he opened with that too on that tour. And it was just like, it's one of those perfect concert openers. Love to Be Loved, I've always liked as a nice deep track. It's beautiful. Blood of Eden is beautiful. Steam, I've never been a fan of. It's just too obviously like, okay, here's another Sledgehammer / big time Steam. And I've never thought Steam was all that good. And there's kind of some, dare I say, filler here in my book. Digging in the Dirt, I think, has turned out to be one of his great singles. Digging in the Dirt is awesome. And I've always loved the closer, Secret World, which he closed his concert with on that tour too. Beautiful song, and just the mood, the groove on that is great. Fantastic bass playing from Tony Levin as usual. But yeah, I always enjoy the artwork on Us. So there we go. All right, coming in at number 5. Oh, by the way, we're with Us and I.O. and then this next one, we're in 4-star territory here. Okay, so next I would have 1982's, Peter Gabriel, or Peter Gabriel 4, or in America, this actually was titled Security. I don't know if it was, Geffen went ahead and slapped a title on it, Security. So sometimes we call this Security. I don't know how you would describe that odd album art on the front there. Anyway, I think his, in some ways, his most sonically experimental album. Very much kind of art rock, although it does have the great single "Shock the Monkey" on there, right? But opening with "Rhythm of the Heat," I think is stunning. Kind of early, continuation from the previous record. Kind of experimentation with world music, rhythms especially. San Jacinto has always been great, although I've always I guess it's more impressionistic anyway. But questions of the historical accuracy there. Yeah, Lay Your Hands on Me and Wallflower, I think, are both really some of those beautiful kind of moody ballads that he does too. Okay, these final 4 here are 5-star territory for me. I think these are all pretty perfect Peter Gabriel records. At number 4, I have the debut, Peter Gabriel, or One, or Car, whatever you want to call it. I had this in my way back when in my best of 1977 list really high. And as I said there, this is sort of like this declaration of independence from Genesis. He had just sort of left Genesis and the constraints of being in a band versus being a band leader. And he you hear it on this record, this freedom, this sonic freedom to experiment and do all these different sounds. And I think it's cool that he opens with Moribund of the Burgermeister, which is probably the most Genesis-like song in his whole catalog. And so it opens just like, oh, so he's just gonna kind of keep going with that. But then that's it. Then it's Salisbury Hill, right? Which is one of his lasting songs. And that song is about, becoming, it's a metaphor, becoming free from the constraints of Genesis. And then he's all over the place gloriously on the rest of this record. Modern Love is a great kind of edgy rocker. Humdrum has beautiful sonic textures. Excuse Me is even this like barbershop quintet thing. I don't know, it doesn't quite work, but it's cool. Slow Burn, another great rocker, and Waiting for the Big One, is dare I say, kind of bluesy, which you don't hear much in Peter Gabriel's music. Down the Dolce Vita was about as art rock and prog as you get on here. Then Here Comes the Flood, stunningly gorgeous closer. So yeah, this, man, coming out of the gate, man, on your solo work. It's pretty awesome. All right. At number 3, the real reason I wanted to include soundtracks on this ranking, because this record is just essential to me, and it is a soundtrack. It is his soundtrack to Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. But Gabriel sort of renamed the album Passion. There it is. Just, I think, stunning. I think this is an incredible record. It's mostly instrumental. It has very little of Gabriel's vocalizing, and when he does, he's not really singing words much. It's just sort of vocals as part of the music landscape. This, I think, is one of the most stunning melding that I've ever heard from anybody. Like real world music, bringing in some of these instruments and maybe some of the Western structure, but a lot of Middle Eastern and African influences, and they just meld beautifully on this. I just, it's almost all instrumental, but I think it's just the moods that it creates. It's one of my favorite records. I love Passion, and it's just something you got to hear. I think a different drum is a stunner, and Gabriel's vocal. I think he's saying some, but you can't hear what words they are. But it's just the passion and the sound in there. God, this is just. I think this is an incredible record. One of the most creative things to ever come out of the '80s, and because this was what, '89, so right at the end of the decade. In between So and Us, but a stunner. All right. That's number 3. So it comes down to these two, of course. What are you gonna say? I think Passion's its own kind of separate type of work. These are, to me, his most realized, regular studio records. Both just perfection, both brilliant, both genius. But I gotta pick. I could kind of do the cool pick at number 1, or the more obvious pick at number 1. But if you've listened to me long enough, you probably know what my favorite Peter Gabriel record is. But this one's right there with it. So at number 2, I do have Melt, Peter Gabriel 3. There you go. Yeah, from 1980. Just brilliant. Brings in some of those world music elements. Almost every song in here is wonderfully experimental, yet still a great song, which is it's a tough thing to do. Intruder, I love. Such a creepy opener where he's singing from the perspective of a cat burglar, right? Someone breaking into someone's house. I can feel your your bated breath. When I am there, and it's just so creepy but cool. No self-control. I don't remember. The Tony Levin bass on the. I don't remember. Family Snapshot, sort of the another interesting perspective song, sort of singing from the perspective of basically an assassin, right? Kind of setting up. The setup sounds almost like the governors and the governor's car, kind of like the Kennedy assassination, basically. Lee Harvey Oswald type of thing, but it's interesting. Games Without Frontiers, one of his great singles. Of course, Biko, the magisterial Biko protest song for, in honor of Stephen Biko, right? And so it's just brilliant. Kind of a fun little thing. He did release, for some reason, a German version, where it's basically these songs, but he sings them all in German. I picked that up, but whatever. So, yeah, Peter Gabriel 3. Therefore, as you probably could guess, I do have So in my number 1 slot. We just did a 1986 ranking recently. I have a whole deep dive episode on this album. I don't want to kind of beat this record to death because we've talked about it so much. But I'll try. There's the dog. I'll try and be very brief. Again, and just sort of summing this up, I think this is the the best, combination between or melding of his artistry, kind of the art rock. I'm going to shut the dog up. Hang on. Okay, the dog is now quiet again, I hope, while we talk about So. Yeah, as I was saying, I think the best melding together of his art rock, his prog past, with just incredible pop chops. This is just great pop music too, pop rock music, but with this artistry, it's just perfect. It is perfect. Red Rain, is one of my very favorite songs. Period. That's just a stunner to me. I love the Stuart Copeland hi hat, going on in there, which is cool. Sledgehammer and Big Time were the great, kind of radio hits, MTV hits with those innovative videos. I actually prefer Big Time over Sledgehammer. Tony Levin again, Tony Levin on the bass on those songs is just stunner. Don't Give Up, of course, his gorgeous duet with Kate Bush. In Your Eyes, which is one of the great ballads of the '80s. Beautiful stuff. I just the whole thing, man. I mean, the whole package. Again, I don't want to go off. I've done a whole video on this album, and I talked about it again in our 1986 ranking. So we don't need to belabor it too much. But Peter Gabriel, So this record hit me at a time. I don't know. When certain time in your youth where music really ingrains itself for the rest of your life. And I remember picking up this up on cassette initially, not being that familiar with Peter Gabriel, and it just I can't remember being so kind of drawn in to any record, upon discovery as this one. It just hit me. Some great B-sides too. I was glad to pick up the this is the single for Sledgehammer. Don't Break This Rhythm, I think, is a awesome, mesmerizing B-side that I wish he had put on here. I guess he could have, Excellent Birds, or we do what we're, I don't know. We do what we're told is pretty good. Mercy Street. I don't know what I would take off to put Don't Break This Rhythm. So yeah, I don't know. That's hard to say, but some really great B-sides too. Well, all right, guys. I want to hear what you think. How would you rank Peter Gabriel's records? Let's talk Peter Gabriel here. So in the comments, how would you rank him? What do you think of his catalog, his discography, all of that? And we got one more episode in the Peter Gabriel week coming up. We're going to look at compilations. We're going to look at live albums. His live albums are pretty important. So we're going to look at the live material. And he's got actually quite a bit of that to look through, which is interesting. So, all of that stuff, we'll hit and kind of wrap everything up next time. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Hit the bell for notifications, like the videos, all that stuff. And we'll see you next time on Amity Tracks.